The Dreamweaver's Ascendancy. Jacob's favored son, a colt of many colors. The late afternoon sun, a benevolent eye in the pale blue sky, cast long, distorted shadows across the dusty Canaanite hills. Jacob sat by the tent's entrance, his gnarled hands calloused from years of tending flocks, his gaze fixed on Joseph. The boy, barely 17, glowed with an inner light, a vibrancy that set him apart. In his hands he held the colt, a riot of crimson and gold, sapphire and emerald, threads woven with an artist's abandon, each stitch a testament to Jacob's boundless love. It draped over Joseph's slender shoulders, catching the light, a vibrant beacon in the muted landscape. His elder brothers, their faces weathered and sun-darkened, watched from a distance. A thick silence hung between them, heavy with unspoken words. Their eyes, narrowed against the setting sun, held a glint of something cold, something that had nothing to do with the day's warmth. They had always toiled in the fields, their bodies aching, their hands raw, while Joseph, the favored son of Jacob's old age, dreamt his bright dreams and wore his father's open affection like a second skin. The very colors of the colt seemed to mock their faded earth-toned tunics. Reuben, the eldest, clutched a shepherd's crook, his knuckles white. The bitterness was a familiar taste on his tongue, acrid and persistent. He remembered the feel of the rough wool on his own skin, the relentless sting of the sun, and the stark contrast of Joseph's easy life. The coat was not just fabric. It was a banner of blatant favoritism, waving defiantly in their faces. Whispers of jealousy, dreams of dominance. The air in the tent hung heavy with the scent of roasted lamb and stale bread, but no one moved to eat. Joseph, oblivious or perhaps simply unconcerned by the palpable tension, leaned forward, his eyes alight with the memory of sleep. His coat, folded neatly beside him, seemed to pulse with a life of its own. "Listen, I had another dream, a strange one." Judah, picking at a piece of dry meat, did not look up. Simon scowled, his jaw tight. "We were out in the field, binding sheaves, and suddenly my sheaf stood upright, and all your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to mine." A collective groan rippled through the brothers. Levi slammed his fist on the ground, sending a plume of dust into the air. "Are you actually going to rule over us? Will you really have dominion over us?" Joseph, his innocence unwavering, continued, his voice barely containing his excitement. "And then I had another dream. The sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." Jacob, who had been listening with a mixture of amusement and concern, finally spoke, his voice gentle but firm. "What kind of dream is this that you have? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow down to you on the earth?" The question hung in the air, weighted with a deeper implication than Joseph could grasp. The brothers exchanged dark glances, their resentment solidifying into something more dangerous. The image of Joseph, vibrant in his coat, lording over them, was a poison that seeped into their very bones. The gathering storm. Brothers' resentment boils. The sun beat down relentlessly on the parched fields, baking the earth into a mosaic of cracks. The air shimmered with heat, distorting the distant hills. Joseph's brothers, their faces etched with sweat and grime, worked in grim silence, their resentment a simmering cauldron beneath their hardened exteriors. Every swing of the sickle, every stoop to gather the meager harvest felt like a renewed injustice. They spoke in low, guttural tones, their words punctuated by the rhythmic thud of their tools against the stubborn soil. That dreamer, always with his grand visions and his father's favor, while we sweat and toil. It's unbearable. Jacob treats him like a prince and us like beast of burden. Reuben, though troubled by "Why are your faces so sad today?" The cupbearer, a man with a perpetually worried brow, sighed deeply. "We both had dreams last night, and there is no one here to interpret them. Interpretations belong to God. Please, tell me your dreams." The cupbearer hesitated for a moment, then began, his voice low and troubled. "In my dream, I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, its blossoms came out and the clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup and put the cup into Pharaoh's hand." Joseph listened intently, his brow furrowed in thought. A calm certainty settled over him as he spoke. "This is its interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office. And you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, as you used to do when you were his cupbearer." The cupbearer's eyes widened with a fragile hope. Then the baker, his face drawn and pale, leaned forward, his voice a nervous whisper. "I also had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of white bread. In the uppermost basket there were all sorts of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." Joseph's expression did not change, but a shadow passed over his eyes. He spoke, his voice gentle but firm. "This is its interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh from you." Across the lands, from distant Mesopotamia to the desolate wildernesses, the grip of the famine tightened, a relentless, suffocating hand. Stories carried on the dry, dusty wind spoke of a land untouched by this blight, a land where grain still flowed in abundance, Egypt. And so, from every direction, desperate families, their faces gaunt, their clothes tattered, began their slow, arduous pilgrimage. They came on donkeys, on foot, their eyes wide with fear and a fragile, desperate hope. The roads leading to the Nile Delta, once quiet trade routes, now teemed with a shuffling, murmuring multitude. Egypt, under Joseph's careful stewardship, became the last bastion against starvation, a beacon in a world consumed by hunger. Its gates, once merely boundaries, now represented the very thin line between life and death for countless souls. The first encounter. Brothers bow before the viceroy. The grand hall of Joseph's palace in Egypt hummed with the quiet urgency of a world in crisis. Sunlight streamed through high windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. But outside, the land withered. Joseph adorned in fine Egyptian linen, a gold chain glinting at his neck, sat on a raised dais, his expression unreadable, his gaze sharp and piercing as petitioners from distant lands approached. The air was thick with the scent of unfamiliar spices and the quiet rustle of official scrolls. Then, through the heavy bronze doors, 10 figures entered, their bodies lean from the journey, their faces etched with the strain of famine. They wore the rough, familiar robes of Canaanite shepherds, their eyes wide with awe and a touch of fear, swept across the opulent hall, finally settling on the commanding figure on the dais. Without hesitation, they prostrated themselves, their faces pressed to the polished floor, exactly as Joseph's youthful dreams had foretold. Joseph's heart gave a violent lurch, a sudden sharp pang. The years fell away, the harsh lines of suffering, the bitterness of betrayal. He saw them not as petitioners, but as Benjamin's elder brothers, as Reuben, as Judah. Their faces, though aged and weathered, were unmistakable. They had no idea who stood before them. To them, he was merely the formidable viceroy of Egypt, a figure of immense power, a god-like provider of grain. "Where do you come from?" Reuben's voice, muffled by his prostrate position, responded with deference. "From the land of Canaan to buy food." "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land." "No, my lord, your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants are not spies." "No, you have come to see the nakedness of the land." "Your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no more." "It is as I said to you, you are spies. By this you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not go from this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you, and let him bring your brother, while you remain confined, that your words may be tested whether there is truth in you. Or else, by the life of Pharaoh, surely you were spies." Jacob's anguish, the price of grain. The barren plains of Canaan stretched out, vast and unforgiving, under a sky that offered no promise of rain. Jacob sat by the entrance of his tent, his frame shrunken, his once strong hands trembling as he clutched a worn staff. The news his sons had brought back from Egypt was a cruel twist in the knife in his old wound. 10 of them, gaunt and weary, stood before him, their faces grim, while Simon remained a captive in the alien land. The sacks of grain they had managed to secure lay beside them. Judah's voice cracked, raw with emotion. He stretched his hands out, a desperate plea. "Now, therefore, when I come to your servant my father, and the boy is not with us, then as his life is bound up in the boy's life, as soon as he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die, and your servants will bring down the gray hairs of your servant our father with sorrow to Sheol. For your servant became surety for the boy to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I shall bear the blame before my father forever. Now, therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the boy as a slave to my lord, and let the boy go up with his brothers. For how can I go up to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the evil that would find my father." The air thickened with Judah's desperate plea. Joseph, who had held himself with such rigid control, felt an uncontrollable tremor pass through him. He saw the transformation in Judah, the raw, selfless love, the willingness to sacrifice himself. It was the atonement he had longed to see, the proof that his brothers were no longer the cruel, heartless youths who had thrown him into the pit. The carefully constructed facade of the stern viceroy began to crack, tears welling in his eyes, blurring the faces of his brothers. The unveiling. I am Joseph. The words were a dam breaking. Joseph could no longer contain the overwhelming flood of emotion that surged through him. He waved his hand, a desperate, urgent gesture to his startled Egyptian servants. "Make everyone leave my presence." Servants and guards, accustomed to his composed demeanor, hurried from the hall, leaving Joseph alone with his bewildered brothers. The heavy doors swung shut, sealing them in a tense, echoing silence. Joseph stood, his face contorted, tears streaming down his cheeks, his shoulders shaking with the force of his suppressed grief and long-held pain. The regal viceroy was gone, replaced by a man utterly undone. He tried to speak, but his voice was choked with sobs, barely intelligible. I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" The words wrung from him with such anguish hung in the air, a shocking, impossible truth. The brothers stared at him, their faces a mixture of confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror. They recoiled, their eyes wide, their hands trembling. They remembered Joseph, the boy, the dreamer, the one they had betrayed and sold. But this man, this powerful Egyptian lord, this was a phantom, an impossible nightmare made real. They could not answer him, frozen in a paralysis of shock and fear. Their minds raced, grappling with the unthinkable. Joseph, seeing their terror, extended his hands, his voice softer now, pleading. They shuffled forward, their movements hesitant, like men approaching a ghost. Joseph, his voice still thick with tears, poured out the truth, the years of suffering and resilience contained in a few profound sentences. "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years the famine has been in the land, and there are yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God, and He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and ruler over all the land of Egypt." The finality of his words, the profound forgiveness laced within them, slowly began to penetrate their fear. A sob escaped Reuben, then Judah. The full weight of their past, the magnitude of their sin, and the incomprehensible grace standing before them crushed them. The land of Goshen, a new beginning. The journey from Canaan to Egypt was long,